about 5 years ago, we asked Charlie Munger, we were sitting right there, what he thought of Bitcoin, and he said rat poison. Back then it was about $100+ per Bitcoin. Today it's 9,000. Is it still rat poison?
Well, probably rat poison squared.
Yo, and welcome back to another episode of the Nyc and Griff Show. Public service announcement. Don't forget to remind your friends and family that one Bitcoin will always be one Bitcoin. Now let's dive in. Today is November 5th. It is 9:33 a.m. The Bitcoin price in US dollars right now is $21,271.86. Griff, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well, and you sound like that Zac Efron trailer where it was like Bitcoin is 1.2 million. I don't know what that is.
I have seen that.
I'd love to know. And two, bearish. I do. I want to say, like, for everybody that probably watched that and said, all right, what year is that in? And is that bullish or bearish? Bearish. 1.2 million, bearish. Very bearish. So funny. How are you doing, brother?
I'm doing good. We're actually just doing audio today. We are in a little cabin in the woods and don't have that great of internet service, I don't think. But everything's going good here and having a fun little weekend.
Yeah, that's pretty. Where are you at? Like in the rural Oklahoma? Wasn't there like a level 4 tornado yesterday just floating around in the middle of Oklahoma? Are you out there at Little House on the Prairie, like about to get swept up?
There was no tornadoes out here yesterday that I know of, but we are in western Oklahoma, in Mutual, Oklahoma is kind of the closest city that's near us. But it's not even really a city. It's more of just a little town. But yeah, we're kind of out in the sticks out here. It's kind of nice to get away and have a little weekend, where we can just kind of chill and be disconnected and stuff. But hey, I'm kind of interested here. I've got some stuff prepared for you. I've taken some notes, done some reading and stuff. We're talking about Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Do you know what document begins with that?
Yes, I do.
Bitcoin Whitepaper.
Podcast now. Yeah.
It is the Bitcoin Whitepaper. If you guys are listening and you have not read the Bitcoin Whitepaper, you got to read it. It's very interesting. But Griff, I kind of just read through the abstract, the very beginning abstract on here that kind of goes over the general principles and idea of what Bitcoin ultimately is. And I've got some notes here. So let's dive into this sucker. I'm just going to read this sentence by sentence. We'll talk about it. Begins here. Abstract. A purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. Interesting. So first thought on that was removing the so-called trusted third party is the key. Preventing double spending is none other than maintaining the accuracy of the ledger that money is, right? So again, that's a purely peer-to-peer version of electronic cash would allow online payments to be sent directly from one party to another without going through a financial institution. It continues here. Digital signatures provide part of the solution, but the main benefits are lost if a trusted party is still required to prevent double spending. Griff, what do you think about these thoughts so far?
I just think that those 3 sentences were worth way more than $1.2 million in the Zac Efron movie. I just think that the cool part is even in the abstract of this original white paper, he writes about trust. And that is something that you don't hear a lot of people talking about. It's actually something that I started talking about more. I don't know why. Like I'm on getting on like year 3-ish of like really like being into Bitcoin at this point and kind of being obsessive about it. Trust is just a fun one to think about, because if you really think about building a world with trustless protocols for every individual little thing, every industry, like how many different things can that make cheaper? How many different things can that help? I mean, it's infinite, really.
It's all just like it's all like from a standpoint of efficiency and innovation and moving forward and development. it is that, right? I mean,
Well, it's as simple as this. I mean, it's as simple as this. If you're, I've always talked this much my entire life, Nick, and you know what I mean, and so does the whole podcast. I've never been able to like concisely put my thoughts down. It takes a lot, or I have to be really, really aware. So that's why I have a podcast where I talk, and some of you guys listen to me, and Nick is forced to. But when you talk about trust, think about innovators and the people who actually develop the world. You know, you're in 4th or 5th grade, and you have this teacher, and you have to trust that they're going to support your crazy ideas as a kid. So eventually, because they shame you, you kind of stop saying them. You know what I'm saying? And then maybe you don't turn into the talented individual you should have been because there was some central authority that told you your cool, crazy idea is stupid. It'll never work in the marketplace, even though they don't actually even know what a marketplace is for the most part in regards to teachers. And also in regards to central authorities, they don't really understand trends. They're just trying to avoid losing out on everything. So when you talk about trust and trustless, I almost think it's the most important part because that's the innovation part. Innovators do not have to trust anything. They can just build and it will always be there.
You know, it's interesting. You think about, like you were talking about teachers a second ago, and the peer-to-peer aspect of this, the non-trust type of system. It really is interesting to think about, you know, to really understand and try to grasp the scope of this whole idea. Like, you have to be aware of economics and how economics plays into the world and how that really shapes what we see as reality in the economic world. But then also we have to connect that thought with what real business is, right? Like you work in sales, I work in construction, estimating, sales, marketing. You know, like we all have different worlds that we live in and operate in. So then we also have to understand, how does this impact this world, right? So this next piece here says, we propose a solution to the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer network, which we've just been talking about. The network timestamps transactions by hashing them into an ongoing chain of hash-based proof of work, forming a record that cannot be changed without redoing the proof of work. Pause. Here's my thought on this. This is the proof of work consensus mechanism, right? This is what makes decentralization possible. So I did an article read a little while back, proof of work versus proof of stake, where we talked about what a consensus mechanism is. But in short, a consensus mechanism is, how do we all agree upon this objective truth without trusting one another, right? How do we objectively verify that this is true? And this, what we're talking about here, where it's time stamping transactions and then hashing them into an ongoing chain of other hash-based proof of work, time-stamped transactions, forming a record that cannot be changed without redoing all of that proof of work that was done previously. Further on that, this proof of work also has an energy requirement or cost that is not free to do, right? So now we're talking about, now we're able to timestamp transactions with a proof of work consensus mechanism that has a real world energy requirement or cost. Now we're connected. Now we've connected this peer-to-peer electronic cash to the real world, and now it's a peer-to-peer network to where we're able to operate directly with each other without a trusted third party or financial institution, right? In our current world, in the middle, that verifies all of these transactions, right? That's huge.
Just a little bit. That's the part where when you start connecting all of these dots, I guess what I would want to talk about is, anybody can read this white paper. Anybody can verify at this point. Literally, you can buy a node, or you can run a miner, or you do what you want to do. But anybody can verify, because the whole thing of Bitcoin is trust, don't verify, don't trust. But anybody can see that this is true for the last 14 years. Yeah. So how amazing is that? Something this decentralized, something this trustless, something this honestly powerful, like you said, an innovation in so many different ways, whether it be the double spending problem, the store of value problem, transaction problem, just the trust a party problem, Or if you want to go all the way back to what was it, like the Trojan horse problem? You're only as good as your best gatekeeper or your worst gatekeeper, really.
Yeah.
You're only as good as like the worst person that'll let you in, and then you guys are all screwed. Like,
Yeah.
so at the very, very end
Yep.
of the day, in the current system, they're only as good as like their worst bank. And then when they start getting worse and worse and worse, and the lending gets worse and worse and worse. I mean, actually, right now in the financial system, technically speaking, we're counting probably on some banker in Japan somewhere following the rules, like, or some banker in Germany. And it's like, well, that I don't want that. You don't want that. My individual sovereignty shouldn't depend on that.
Sure.
So that is where Bitcoin comes into play. It's the first network, so to speak, where it's talking about all this internet e-cash stuff with a distributed ledger that you can just verify that we never have to like redo it again. We never have to go back, because effectively changed what money is. So yeah, I think it's pretty cool.
I think up to this point, it makes me kind of think too, and some of the things you were saying, like, it's so easy once you get into Bitcoin, once you dive down the rabbit hole and you start really learning about it, you're like, I'm just, like I'm skeptical, right? Everybody kind of starts maybe a little skeptical. The healthy skepticism, right, is always good. Once you dive in and you start learning what some of the foundational pieces of this deal are, it's so motivating, makes you want to go out and yell it from the mountaintops, right? You just want to go tell everybody about it. I mean, that's like, there's whole memes that are made to that, right? Can you own Bitcoin and not talk about it? Like all that kind of stuff. That it's funny because it's true. But then also another part of this too is like some of the things that we're talking about here: peer-to-peer networks, trusted third parties, double spending. What is double spending? What does it mean to timestamp transactions and hash them into a chain of other timestamp hashed proof of work verified transactions? These types of things that we're talking about, these types of I guess terms you could call them, these are where we have to start asking better questions to people that are skeptics, that don't believe, right? And I say that, I don't want to say believe, because there is no belief in Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just verifiable. It is just objectively what it is, right? Now you could say that there's maybe belief in like the development into the future. Like, I believe that people are going to continue developing it to make it a better use case, right? Better integrated into the world where we can really use it. You could maybe say that there's belief there, but Bitcoin itself, right, in the peer-to-peer network that Bitcoin is, the zero trust network that Bitcoin is, the decentralized consensus mechanism that Bitcoin is, that is all objectively verifiable, right? And it makes me think like we have to start asking better questions, right? So, another thing, like we're talking about a network where there is no trusted third party. It's all verifiable, direct peer-to-peer. Why wouldn't we ask somebody, why wouldn't we want that? Why would we want something that does have a trusted third party? Why would we want, like, what is the differences, and why would we want one over the other? Those are the questions we gotta be asking people. That instead of telling them, hey, Bitcoin is the future, Bitcoin is this and that, we've got to make people's minds think a little bit, right? Because Bitcoin's not something you just tell and you're like, oh, cool, that makes sense, I love Bitcoin now. You have to read it, right? You have to get into it. You have to try to understand it.
So you think that in order for Bitcoin to be adopted in a major way, you think that we're going to have to be able to communicate the base layer of it to the average individual? Like, we're going to have to be able to explain it to them well? Because I personally, I guess, answer my own question, I personally do not. I personally think that things like Strike are so good, and different Lightning Pay services. Like, there's currently a mad dash to adopt like the biggest Lightning payments network in the world. Like there 100% is. Why? Because, I mean, it might not seem like much, but if Bitcoin does end up being the world's unit of account, the world's store of value, you're the one taking all of these transactions. Because the thing I do not believe is not everybody's going to be able to run a node like you're talking about. Not everybody's going to want to run a node. Although there's going to be some people that are well educated that are going, well, it's only like $300 and maybe a little electricity. Maybe I should just run my own node because that would be advantageous. But most people won't, but they will interact with other people's nodes in large node
Yeah.
networks. So I kind of think it doesn't matter. Like, we can sit here all day and rattle, how are we going to get grandma to buy it? How are we going to get dad to buy it? Like, I don't care if they buy it. Honestly, don't buy it. I could care less. Don't. Nobody, everybody. Nick, it's a bad idea. Bitcoin's a bad idea. I think we should spend a little more time on this podcast talking about how people should not buy this very bad idea. What do you think? I mean, we should stop telling people to buy it. It's bad. Don't get Bitcoin. No Bitcoin.
Well, I guess your first part is like, the first question was kind of, does everybody have to know and understand what the base layer of Bitcoin is for it to be adopted?
Yes.
I absolutely agree with you. At some point, if it works, and people will use it if it's able to be used, right? I think that we are in an interesting time, though, right? I mean, think of this in terms of the internet just beginning, right? I mean, how many hilarious videos and memes are there out there of people who didn't understand what the internet was early on and look like bozos today because we use it all day, every day. Now, nobody's still like, I mean, could you and I put together like kind of a rough idea of what the internet is? I mean, maybe like, but the internet's not like an easy concept to understand, especially if you've never heard of the internet and you've never operated on something with the internet. That's, I think, exactly what Bitcoin is. And I think that if more people understand what the underlying value is, then it makes adopting the technology easier. And my example on that might be something like gold-backed dollars, right? Would we ever have gold-backed dollars? Would we have ever adopted gold-backed dollars if nobody knew or understood what the value of gold was? And I would argue that maybe you probably wouldn't, right? But I also agree that.
Well, this is where the internet comes into play, in my
opinion.
opinion. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
The internet is as a part of Bitcoin as the fiat world's current infrastructure, CNN, NBC, whatever news networks, whatever communications channels the current network has built out, right, will be entirely different from the media outlets that are built in a Bitcoin world, because everything will be, looked at, I guess, differently. So I guess, just into your point, the internet is important here because it can deliver messages quicker. It can connect people quicker all over the world. It can do things that in the old network, where you're talking about gold-backed dollars, it's like, well, like, unless you had a smart neighbor, which back then, dude, imagine back then all of these kids that are trading, that you can hate them for trading or not. They do understand economics. They do understand how to like make money. They do understand how markets work to a degree. So how would they have been done in 1942? Oh, they'd have done really well if the internet was around, because it wasn't that hard to see it coming. It's just how they had ineffective communication channels. They didn't have the internet. So I think that's a big difference now, not only in like financial markets, but just life in general, where money affects it. It's like, inflation.
Another thing that I think is super important too, right? Like, I'm sure you've heard it a lot. I don't know how much you talk to people that do not like Bitcoin, but a lot of the times I hear people talking about volatility. And I think, if you don't understand what makes the core protocol what it is, and why it's valuable and how it was put together, I think it makes it difficult to hold the Bitcoin when it's
now.
up and down and up and down and up and down right now, right? Because right now we don't have the we don't have the whole network put together, right, to where we can utilize the network to its full power and capabilities. At some point, for sure, whenever it's just the money that we use because it's the most efficient way to transact with each other, then at that point it's probably not going to matter, because the use case and the network of the money is so large at that point that the stability of Bitcoin is just going to be inherent in itself. I think that's kind of interesting at this point.
I think in regards to Bitcoin, like, until it in a major way can be borrowed against, because I think that's truthfully how they're going to get a lot of people's Bitcoin next. Bitcoin will go up in value. There will be currencies around. You know what I'm saying? There will still be these networks that we're talking about. The United States government, the biggest network currently around, it will be around for a long time. It's going to take a long time for it to go to zero or to unwind or to not be a major part of the world or blah, blah. It's going to take a long, long time.
Yeah.
So Bitcoin, I think, will go up in value increasingly because it's so volatile, because it's so small. People don't understand $1 million a coin is not really even that big. Like it's $1 million a coin is like, oh, so you can borrow against Bitcoin to buy a house because that's a better backing than treasuries, and like that's a pretty obvious statement. We're just not doing it right now. But imagine for the people all holding Bitcoin right now, renting instead of owning any of these homes as the like market goes down. There's still only 21 million and the price will go up. What happens to all those people when the banks go, yeah, hey, if you give us a Bitcoin, like, yeah, like you can have whatever the hell you want. Like, just give us the Bitcoin.
Well, another thing we can't forget too, like we always talk about the 21 million supply cap. Another thing that we can't forget to talk about and think about is the supply inelasticity, meaning that as value, as demand goes up in Bitcoin, the supply is not altered and the flow of supply is not altered based upon the protocol. So the supply can never be altered.
What you're talking about is how simple it is, like it's so simple.
Crazy.
Did you see the Vitalik shit that just came out yesterday?
What was it?
Dude, he posted this like big old picture and he was just like, oh my gosh, this is like this protocol, and then this is what happens after the merge, and then this, and this. And I'm just like, okay, like why are people buying this shit? Like, because you think he's smart? Maybe he's smart, maybe he's building he's building something, he's building a Frankenstein, like he's building a very ugly monster. Maybe it works, but like that's exactly the system we're in now. Does it work? Has it advanced the world? Sure. But when did we stop asking ourselves, why can't it be better? Like that's what I don't get. People stopped asking that question a while ago. They're like, well, Africans have rice now. Like you can donate them some water. Yeah, this network's the best. Like we're killing it. Like we're obviously doing a really good job. It just, when did people stop striving for like what's actually better? I don't know. It's very interesting, but very proof of stake.
Very proof of stake. Okay, let's continue down here. Remember, we're just reading the abstract here. This is just the couple of sentences, the little paragraph that really kind of sets the foundation for what this whole document is. So continue down. It says the longest chain not only serves as proof of the sequence of events witnessed, but proof that it came from the largest pool of CPU power. As long as a majority of CPU power is controlled by nodes that are not cooperating to attack the network, they'll generate the longest chain and outpace attackers. So again, one of my other notes was this proof of work has an energy requirement or cost. It's not free to do, right? Which is a big piece. And then another thought on this is the incentives, right? The incentive structure is something we've talked a lot about. It says the incentives are designed in such a way where if you're connected to the network in any way, you're incentivized to work with the network and not against it, right?
That's what people don't talk about either. Oh, if there's a supercomputer, oh, if there's this. If you get into the weeds of Bitcoin, it's like, yeah, but then like, why wouldn't I just mine all of it? Why wouldn't I just start putting my hash into it? What's the point of fighting it? Fighting it would effectively ruin everything. Playing along with this thing just makes me wealthier. I mean, like, you can get rich in Bitcoin, right? Like, do you agree? I mean, even if it's all distributed out.
Just inherently, if some supercomputer were to come and be able to alter the Bitcoin blockchain without impacting other pieces, right, and was able to take control over the network is immediately useless and nobody would use it anymore because now it's been compromised, right?
Exactly. And
so
I think
then you can steal all the Bitcoin, but the Bitcoin doesn't have any value because then everybody would leave the network, right?
Well, also though, to be fair, even if you're like 50, you're all this hash rate, like all you can do is get the new Bitcoin and transactions. And when Lightning is sent down to the layer 1 and things like that is where you can only take it. At a certain point, it's not even advantageous to do it because all you'd really be doing is like basically waiting for people to spend it. But like, you also never have to spend it. Your keys, your Bitcoin, like everybody's equally as powerful. So it's kind of just, oh man, I love talking about it. All right. How are we getting, what are we going to next with the white paper?
Okay. Next piece here. So this is the last couple sentences that I'm going to read here. Says the network itself requires minimal structure. Messages are broadcast on a best effort basis, and nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the longest proof of work chain as proof of what has happened while they were gone. So that's the abstract of the Bitcoin white paper. Now, I want to also read the introduction here, just so that if somebody's a little bit interested, here's the introduction for the paper, and then it's going to be your homework to go and read the rest. So, reading the introduction here, it says, commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions serving as trusted third parties to process electronic payments. While the system works well enough for most transactions, it still suffers from the inherent weaknesses of the trust-based model. Completely non-reversible transactions are not really possible since financial institutions cannot avoid mediating disputes. The cost of mediation increases transaction cost, limiting the minimal practical transaction size and cutting off the possibility for small casual transactions. And there is a broader cost in the loss of ability to make non-reversible payments for non-reversible services. Now, that's an interesting deal. Non-reversible payments for non-reversible services. With the possibility of reversal, the need for trust spreads. Merchants must be weary of their customers hassling them for more information than they would otherwise need. A certain percentage of fraud is accepted as unavoidable. These costs and payment uncertainties can be avoided in person by using physical currency, but no mechanism exists in making payments over a communications channel without a trusted party. What is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust, allowing any two willing parties to transact directly with each other without the need for a trusted third party. Transactions that are computationally impractical to reverse would protect sellers from fraud, and routine escrow mechanisms could easily be implemented to protect buyers. Couple more sentences here. In this paper, we propose a solution in the double spending problem using a peer-to-peer distributed timestamp server to generate computational proof of work proof of the chronological order of transactions. The system is secure as long as the honest nodes collectively control more CPU power than any cooperating group of attacker nodes. There's your introduction to the Bitcoin white paper.
And to be frank, probably one of the best written pieces of paper, not only the greatest innovation probably in our lifetime, but they're solving like human greed. They're solving like legitimate issues that money itself has never been able to solve. And it's because he was creative enough to think about money as a network, money as something bigger than just one commodity or one thing. Like he really thought, I mean, how thoughtful does somebody have to be to write that, or how lucky? Like one of the two. Like how thoughtful or how lucky? Because nowadays, like, is something that, and this is what it's hard for people to understand. We're still very early in the Bitcoin, but we're far enough along where people have the ideas. There's a lot of people better than me sitting around here, not only just like talking about how it's like, yeah, I don't understand how like Walmart isn't just taking lightning payments now. Like how they're not completely changing up how they would take payments in brick and mortar stores, because it should actually be a lot easier now, and they should be able to get their money faster, and they should get their money cheaper. It's not that. We're only 14 years in. It's probably already happening, and you're probably already behind. So that is the type of thing Bitcoin is. It's something that any Tom, Dick, and Harry can go, I can be the next Rockefeller. I can be the next Carnegie. Why? Because it changes the entire landscape of money. It changes the entire paradigm. And it also, if you didn't hear most of it, it can be integrated into the real world that exists today. So everything that is out there that exists, it just has to be divided by 21 million. That doesn't mean we have to lose quality. It means we're probably going to lose a bunch of crap. You know, cream rises to the top. And unfortunately, there will be hard times, but there's only going to be hard times because we've sold our future. I mean, for anybody listening to this, the double spending problem, the derivatives, the fake money, the fake investments, the arbitrage, the being able to buy 30-year mortgages and getting quote unquote passive income to become financially free. No, you're going to have to think about counterparty risk in the future. You're going to have to think about how a government can just take it from you. You're going to have to think about, your individual liberties again, because clearly the world's changing. They're infringing upon them. And that white paper is here to protect us. Like, that is the people's new government, in my opinion. That's the people's new constitution, Declaration of Independence. Because now we have something that we can build on and live by, where we do no longer need a central authority for really just about anything. And I think that's what it'll be looked at as in like 100 years. Because if you talk to Bitcoiners, there's not one of them really that's like, yeah, we should just kind of keep going on this like democracy thing. Maybe there's people who think we need to work with certain parts of our politics to advance Bitcoin, but there's not a single person that really, if you dive deep down into it, goes, so like, hey, if this Bitcoin thing works out, we're totally going to need this overarching government thing, right? No, we don't. Like Nick talked about, what question you say we should ask people? Like, why wouldn't you want peer-to-peer? It's like, yeah, seriously, like, why would you not want everything to be like instant and peer-to-peer? Like the conversation that you just had, if it went well, you get rewarded as the salesman because it went well, boom, done. You can get your money right now. And people don't have to do as much financial planning and the accounting and all the bullshit and all the hiding and all the taxes, because there will only be 21 million. I mean, so savings will matter again. Maybe not in our lifetime, but eventually. So those are my closing thoughts. But the white paper, I mean, like just the abstract has to be one of the best written and most thoughtful pieces of paper in regards to like, if you're trying to change the world, how would you have done it? And this guy came around and he said, let's do it via money. If you don't think that's divine, or you don't think that that is some sort of like weird thing to have happened, I mean, it took a lot of work. Like it didn't just come out of nothing. And obviously he was probably a person, but to think that it wasn't some altruistic, like definitely an endeavor for this person, it was, I think. And it was a very thoughtful, I'm glad you read it. It's a very thoughtful piece of work.
It's interesting that you kind of finished up there. My closing thought after going through both the abstract and the introduction was, it seems like in the Bitcoin space, people get so enamored with like the creation of Bitcoin or the innovation that Bitcoin is. And I think it's easy to get sidetracked and think that Bitcoin is more than what it really is. And my thought on this is that Bitcoin, just like many other things, is just an innovation based on what we knew at the time and what we had put together. And then what happened was, because Bitcoin was not the first attempt at this, right? You can go back and look at all these other attempts at making this e-cash or this electronic cash, right? And Satoshi just happened to be the guy that put everything together in the right order and in the right sequence for it to work the way that it has, right? And this makes me think of like the Industrial Revolution, right? The creation of the wheel, how we create steel, right, for all kinds of different uses, how we build cars, how we build homes. I'm just literally just kind of looking around at where I'm at right now, like ceiling fans, light bulbs, stoves, heaters, like all of these different things. All they are human innovations, right? They're human innovations, and they're not perfect, but they may be the best thing that we know how to do today, right? And I think that is what is true of Bitcoin, is that I don't think that Bitcoin is perfect. I think that there is opportunity for its development into the future, and I think that it is possible that there could be a better money. But at this time, with what we know today, Bitcoin seems to be, in my mind and everything that I've looked into, it seems to be the best path forward that we have for a sound money, which has all the benefits that we've talked about ad nauseum in many previous episodes before this. I think that is what Bitcoin is, right? It's nothing other than another human innovation that is simply the best way of doing things. Now, albeit it's a huge innovation, and it's not something as minor as like, oh, we found a new way to do this thing. Like, it is a huge overhaul to how we transact economic value, right? Which is incredible scope of what that really impacts, right? But it is no different than just another human innovation, and with today's knowledge is the best option that we've got.
I agree. Great way to
Guys, you're not watching today because we are not doing video. It's only audio because I don't have that great of internet, which it actually turned out to be fine. So anyways, but if you don't watch, go check us out on YouTube and on Spotify. We've also got video on Spotify, and we've got audio on all the major platforms. So check us out there. Come hit us on Twitter. We are active on Twitter all the time, talking to people, tweeting. We also put all of our clips up on Twitter. So go check those out on Twitter. And this has been another episode of the Nyc and Griff Show. Griff, I'll see you next week, man.
Peace.